Hello people of the internet, it's Amanda, and if you're new here on my channel, I usually talk about Japanese movies, dramas, entertainment. Sometimes I tap into other Asian pop culture topics as well, but if you've browsed through my videos before or you've looked through my channel before watching this video, then you can already tell that I'm such a huge fan of Number I, and that's what this video is going to be about. So they have a documentary streaming on Prime Video right now. It's a 4-part series, but only episodes 1 and 2 are out as I'm making this video. I plan to make another kind of like reaction talk through video for episodes 3 and 4 once that's released. But let's talk about episodes 1 and 2 for now. I will be dividing this video into just segmenting it into different parts when it comes to just the discussion, just so I can kind of like organize my thoughts. So I will be doing kind of like a general talk through of what I saw, like the observations, all that, and then I will dive deep into just some thoughts or discoveries about each and every member as we go along. If you're in for that, then please keep on watching. Starting off with just a general thoughts about this video. So it kicks off, it starts off May 2024. Bon has just been released, so they didn't really cover it, which to my disappointment, because I absolutely would have loved seeing, Shaw's production process and creating that. But he's talked about it extensively, the way that he's conceptualized it, and also did edits for like a rough reference for the music video. So there's that. Now they're kicking things off in terms of planning for Inazuma. And the documentary starts off with this kind of like montage of what they've done prior to that, which is GOAT just amassing massive amount of views, hitting top charts, not just in Japan, but even outside of Japan in the US. And also just each of their lead tracks that they've been releasing so far has been getting really good numbers, really like just a lot of streams when it comes to like sales and all that. They've been doing really well. They perform at Coachella just under 6 months of debuting. So there was really just a lot of things that already happened when this all kind of like started. And just watching through that montage at the beginning already got me emotional. Like, it wasn't even within the 2-minute mark of the documentary, but it was just so interesting to see that even before all these like other things have developed with them, kind of like holding their first concert and all that, they've already done so much with the little like with so much like little time to prepare and anything, knowing how involved they are in their productions and everything. It's just so kind of like intense to see in terms of figures. So yeah. Now I think the first couple of like just the bulk of episode 1 and 2, there's a huge focus on Jin as well, because of like it centers around the production of Inazuma, which I have no problem with. But it really shows like even if the focus, most of the focus was Jin talking about, like the back and forths of this, you also see Kishi and Sho with their own kind of like takes and inputs into the entire process, and you just see the entire dynamic of how they work together as a group. It's interesting to see like opinions of like the producers, the composers, choreographers, Kazdafar, Pekori-san, Monjo-san, just seeing all these people kind of like talk about how it's just crazy how like collaborative they are, because usually with artists, they get pitched something, they do share some of their ideas and everything, but it's ultimately up to the pros on how they will kind of like shape the entire thing and all that. And I'm not saying that Number I is very, very unique in a sense that there are the only artists doing this. Obviously, there are other artists who are also as involved in their own craft in such close proximity. But it's not always the case, and it's understandable why the people that they're working with are so in awe of that level of work ethic, because again, like they are taking so much command of how they want the direction of their identity to be as a group. And that's just really something, like at an age where everything is driven by engagement, virality, what's popular, all that. Like there's really very little room now to experiment because it's so easy to fail in this space, but being unafraid to kind of like jump into that, to try these things, um in an age with everything would have been so much easier if it was made commercial. That's also like another level of just courage, I think, and bravery, seeing them do that. So yeah, so it's just so interesting, just the dynamic of how they're really into every single detail of what they do. Another interesting about them is it seems like they're just really interesting, genuine people to like work with. Um, like the way that they interact with their dancers, and even the way that like everyone that they work with, when you see them kind of like sharing content on Twitter or Instagram, or just sharing stuff about these guys, the way that the like people talk about them and how like they collaborate is just so interesting to see as a fan, because sometimes like these behind the scenes stuff, people don't need to talk about them, and it's also something that I've observed ever since, like before, when it comes to just show specifically, the way that directors kind of like talk about things that are not aired and wouldn't be aired, when it comes to like their behind the scenes personality, all that. So just kind of like seeing how much support they're getting from people, and even through this documentary, seeing how they collaborate and kind of like treat people within their team is just kind of like, again, it's probably like the bare minimum of how artists should be when it comes to the teams that they're working with. But knowing how the industry is and how it can be, it's just really, really nice to see that they haven't fallen into that kind of like we're the star mentality of not being able to like go to this, like treat people who they're working with in kind of like this equal footing. And it's so nice to see them kind of like level and be humble, in a sense, but while still asserting what they want to happen and what they want to like show into the world, while also respecting the people that they're working with. And it's just such a delight to see, as a fan of theirs. Now that's mostly that for kind of like the group stuff. Let's focus on the individual stuff. Now, again, focusing on Jin, I mentioned this, like I think a lot of focus in the past two episodes, at least for episode 1 and also part of episode 2, was on Jin, because he is the one producing Inazuma, and part of like the coverage of the documentary is their process for Inazuma. And what I noticed with Jin is that, like, even during their Kimpori era, he was referred to as the last boss. He was kind of like the guy in charge when it comes to, the way that he's producing some of their concerts and all these things. So producer Jin isn't exactly new to me, at least as someone who's been a fan of them even from way back when. But seeing him in motion, he has such a steady look into what he wants to do. And he's always very calm in the way that he wants to approach things. And what's interesting about it is he's also like, I always love it whenever he starts geeking out about things that he loves. It's not just, whenever I see him on Twitter talking about motorbikes or denim or anything like that, but it also shows when it comes to the type of music that he wants to put out there. He talks about how he's a fan of like 90s, 2000s music, he's a fan of like vintage tees and band shirts, and most of that kind of like seeps through the style that he wants. But he's also very receptive when it comes to feedback. He's also very open when it comes to switching things up a bit. And another thing with Jin, and I think very common for all three of them, is they're never easily satisfied. Like they're at that place where when they're not satisfied with what they're putting out there, they're now unafraid to kind of like jump into it and ask for, you know, if they can redo it. They're not afraid to start from scratch again and kind of like push their own limits. And it's very evident in the way that Jin was also kind of like um producing Inazuma, and he was very careful as well as very pointed in terms of the intent that he has as to how he wants this track, what's the inspiration for it, how is this concept going to reflect, or how's the music video concept going to reflect this, and all these other stuff, you know. So it's very, very interesting to see that. And whenever like Jin, or whenever Sho or Kishi talks about how kind of like calm and organized Jin is, it's very evident in the way that he's produced his tracks, is because he's very, like, he knows his intent, he knows his kind of like what he wants to happen, and he's very meticulous about it, and it's just so interesting to see. And what's also interesting is seeing him get frustrated whenever things feel like, you know, it's not going his way, like when he's recording by 24/7. He isn't unafraid to kind of like admit his own kind of like insecurities, but also is opening up to, you know, even if it's a bit selfish or anything like that, he wants to pursue something that he is absolutely proud of. And it's just so interesting to watch unfold. And yeah. Now, moving on to Kishi. So I love it whenever whenever Sho and Jin talks about Kishi in a way that, you know, as much as everyone sees Kishi as this very kind of like laid back, straightforward kind of guy, really, really kind and all that, whenever they talk about him producing something, they always hold him in high regard. And through this documentary, people would be able to see why. Kishi with Recipe, the way that he approached this, it's his first solo song. He also had a huge hand in terms of the music, composing it, everything. And it's self-produced as well. It's, you can see just the level of, there's a level of humility there. And also, like, it was also pointed out in the documentary, he was very humble in the way that he approaches things, but in the way that he collaborates with different musicians and professionals who are in the same environment as him. But he also knows what he wants, and he like wouldn't be satisfied until that particular kind of like standard is met or even exceeded. And the way that he's just a hard worker that's not really giving up in terms of just making things sound like this and being collaborative to achieve that certain goal is just so evident and so interesting to see. I think for Kishitans who are watching, who will watch this, they would fall in love with Kishi even more because of just the level of detail and also just genius that went into producing that song. But it was met with so much humility and kindness that is so familiar, like what we're familiar with who Kishi is as an artist. And it's just so interesting to watch. Like that entire process of just him kind of conceptualizing it, being unsure, but also, and I think that's something that I've liked about, you know, the three of them, is because um being unsure, it doesn't really discourage, it doesn't discourage them, but it kind of like fuels the fire even more to kind of like do something, be better, and not being shy to kind of like ask people to, like, if we can try this again. They're not holding back anymore, which is really, really interesting to me. It's feeling that sense of freedom of chasing after the level of perfection that they want. It's also very evident in the way that Kishi was recording Recipe. Um, and yeah, and it was just so, it was so beautiful to watch, especially knowing that he started from there, kind of like hesitating at first, not really feeling too confident about it, but also knowing what he wants. And then the way that he presented it in the area, in the like live tour with the sound mixer, it's just crazy, like knowing how that happened, and then they jump from this other thing and seeing how they've approached that, and the challenges like being overcome from producing all those songs to them actually kind of like performing it. So good, and that seriously applies to Recipe. And then lastly, obviously, I'm leaving Shaw for last because I'm a Shawtan and I've been a fan of him for like how many years now? 7-ish, I think, approaching 8 years now. Um, Now with Shaw has always been the reason why I've always been curious when it comes to how they approach things or how they produce things is because even during their Kimpari era, Shaw has always been kind of like very passionate when talking about producing things or being involved in things. Like he's always has this vision of wanting to make things happen, and he's unafraid to kind of like want to try it out. He's done that before with so many different things. Like for example, with Magic Touch before, he was very vocal in terms of how he kind of like fought for it to happen when it comes to, you know, pitching a collaboration with Crevasan before, because he loves him and he loves his music, and he feels like if it's going to be rejected, then sure, but at least they tried to reach out to him to collaborate, and they ended up collaborating with him. And now with Boundy-san, um again, they talked about it in the sense that Sho sent this very passionate kind of like request to collaborate, and it also happened. And it's something that he's always wanted and has on his mind ever since he had a dream. He's always kind of like this presence of 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 chasing after things and trying things, and if he gets rejected or if he fails, then at least he tried. And I've always liked that attitude, like that kind of like attitude from him. um but I think another thing that I've noticed throughout this is he's always unapologetically opinionated, not in a sense that it's rude or anything like that, but he's always like out there to like share his thoughts on how things could be improved or how things could have been done differently, or if they can try it out and whatever. And I think that roots from him being unafraid to fail or be rejected, is because in his mind it's better to kind of like speak up about it than to regret not talking about it. But he also knows when to kind of like step back in a sense, um and that shows a lot about, you know, his kind of like approach as an artist. You know, he is a go-getter, and there's this like watching the documentary reminded me so much of that Mste segment where he was talking to Jin and Kishi, and he was kind of like saying, you know, he kind of like apologized in a sense, um uh, because he sometimes can get a little bit too forward and opinionated about things, and he can be very meticulous and particular. And then Kishi and Jin were like, no, it's fine, like we know that your intention is to make things, you know, be better and to polish things and all that, and it's all about respect. And that always makes me emotional, because it's always hard to be the most opinionated person in the room. And I'm speaking from experience here, because you can come across at, even if you know within yourself that your intentions are good or whatever, and you're just doing it to make things better. um it takes a lot of like courage and confidence to put it out there, and to accept that if it's going to be rejected, and fine or whatever. It just takes a lot of that, and to be able to be in that environment where you feel like it's okay to be that way is such a huge relief. And I'm really happy that that Kishi and Jin are always almost very receptive of Sho, like if whether or not they agree with him or anything. But it seems like they're always in sync in a sense as to where he's coming from. It's not necessarily that all the time they would agree, because Sho and Jin have talked about, you know, having disagreements before when it comes to, in other interviews, they've talked about having disagreements before, but it's not really fights in a sense. It's more of like heated discussions about directions and all these things. But still being able to continue that kind of relationship without feeling like you're overstepping something, or without take feeling like it's personal, that means so much. And I'm really happy that Choi is in that kind of environment, because he is the type of person who would always be like kind of like the first person to say something, if he notices something, and just having a group that is very group, and also like team members who are very receptive of that, is like such a huge deal. um Seeing his work ethic is really interesting. His combination with Van Di-san is just super cute. I think the way that they recorded Tome ni Naritai, I love that he's able to like explore more of his vocal potential in trying out things, and even if it's hard, like he is willing to take on that particular role, and it goes for all of them. Like this is uncharted territory for them. Like they're trying out different genres, but I like it when Jin mentioned that no matter what the genre is, it's still number I, and it's because they don't want to be confined in this kind of like just small space of being this kind of artist or this kind of artist. Like every single thing that they're putting out there, it's them because of how involved they are. Now that said, I think it's crazy because, again, having been a fan of them for so long, I've never thought that I would love them even more. But I guess like after watching that documentary, after wanting it for so long, I mean, obviously like watching behind the scenes of their concerts or their kind of like singles and albums, like it's kind of like a documentary in itself, but it's kind of like different in this sense where there's really like a focal point in terms of talking to the people that they're working with. The focus is not just on them or the content they're doing, but basically everything about it, like the holistic picture of it. I wish that each episode would have been a lot longer. I know that they've cut off like a lot of it, but I wish that they could have been longer, because there's just so much there that I feel I could have fit into that, like recording, all of these other things, whatever. But I think just overall, it's just so exciting to see them in this particular space of being able to kind of like have that sense of freedom to be able to chase after what they want. And they're always in this constant pursuit to exceed what they've done in the past. And I think having that sense of freedom and having these kind of like openness and resources and just involvement kind of like allows them to satisfy that constant craving. And I'm really, really happy to see it. I'm curious as to what episodes 3 and 4 are going to be about. And there's just so many things that have happened to them in the past year. I'm not sure like if 30 minutes per episode can even cover a margin of that, but I'm just really happy that this documentary happened, and I'm so excited to see the rest of it. And I don't know, but I just love them a lot more than I never thought I could have already. But yeah, so with that said, tell me down in the comments below, have you seen the episodes? What are your thoughts, your favorite moments from it? I'm really curious to see you, like to hear your thoughts, and what like are your favorite kind of like moments. What did it say to you about your favorite member or the entire group? All of that, let's talk it out in the comments below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to my channel and you would want to hear more from me, please hit subscribe. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you again soon in a new one. Bye.